This is my third video about Jordan Peterson, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, and his criticism of philosophies like postmodernism and Marxism, and of identity politics. Today we will have a look at his views on feminism and on political correctness. According to the Swedish journalist Ivar Arpi, the Swedish government wants 40% of all professors at Swedish universities by 2020 to be women, which will lead to massive problems concerning scientific competence, since most women don't want to pursue a scientific career. As Peterson comments in their online discussion from December 2017, as a young, gifted male scientist in Sweden, you will have basically no chance to find a job at a Swedish university in the future. What now follows is taken from different talks by and interviews with Peterson from the last 2 years. Peterson refers to Carl Gustav Jung to explain this devastating development. The unconscious representation of a woman in a man's psyche is always an individual woman. The unconscious representation of a man in a woman's psyche is always men as a group, he says. Women who have never had a stable relationship with a man who was masculine and who have been hurt cannot distinguish between male authority and competence and male tyrannical power. All they see is the oppressive male, and they project this paranoid picture of what constitutes hierarchical masculinity onto the world and fight to bring it down, and the problem is that they are successful. They are afraid of any display of competence, and they are unwilling to display it in their own lives, because they think of it as the tyranny that they are accusing the system of. These people are a target for indoctrination by the radical professors in subjects like anthropology, ethnic studies, women's studies, education, and sociology. By their idiot professors, they are taught not just compassion for the dispossessed, but even more so, hatred of the successful, that all men are suspect, and that the sociological structure of the world must be transformed. Today we are dominated by a view of masculinity that is characteristic of women who have serious personality disorders and who are unable to have healthy relationships with men, he says. We made a haven for these people in the social sciences at the universities. According to Arpi, in Christianity the sin is situated within everyone, but in feminism it's only within the men. Peterson corrects him, not just within men, but within men as a collective. In Christianity, each individual is responsible for his or her own darkness. As soon as you move away from the view that the darkness is to be found within instead of without, you end up with the view that you are the good person and so is everyone who thinks like you, and the evil ones are the others. And if this evil is considered contemptible and parasitic, the logical directive is to exterminate it. According to Arpi, in a Swedish study, a male feminist stated that his way of approaching sex was not to take any initiative at all, not to defile the woman. Many Swedish men see themselves as being guilty and bad after the Me Too campaign, he says. Men want to show that they are better than other men by saying that they are responsible for approaching women. Most people in society don't think that gender is a social construct, that there are 4 sexes, and that avoid naming boys and girls is a good idea, Peterson says. According to a research study published recently in the Atlantic Monthly, only 8% of Americans believe in the ideological view that there is a patriarchy, and 30% of all Americans think feminism has gone too far. It's a view driven by ignorance and resentment, he says. One of the things that are put forward is that male aggression should be inhibited or suppressed, and that boys should be socialized like girls, which is a dreadful idea. According to Peterson, the psyche has a biological grounding, and there are natural differences between men and women. Women are more neurotic than men, which means that they feel more negative emotion, primarily anxiety and emotional pain. And cross-culturally, women are more likely to be diagnosed with depression and an anxiety disorder. On the other hand, they are higher in compassion and politeness. Men's disagreeableness is reflected in the fact that they are much more likely to be arrested and imprisoned. Women have an edge in verbal ability, men in spatial ability. Women are more enthusiastic, men are more assertive. Men are more industrious, women are more orderly. Women are higher in openness, men are higher in interests and ideas. Women tend to be more interested in people and men in things, which is one reason for the fact that men tend to earn more money than women do, because you can produce a huge amount of things in a short time. But you can only take care of a small number of people in the same time period, and men also tend to work longer hours. The differences are most obvious in the extremes. Almost all the people who are really interested in things are men, and almost all the people who are really interested in people are women. In the universities, the majority of the female-dominated disciplines are politically correct, Peterson says. What is the psychology behind political correctness? According to Peterson, predictors for political correctness are scoring high on agreeableness and on negative emotion, two traits typical of women, as well as symptoms of personality disorder, which is also more common among women than among men, as we have seen. There is no evidence that these factors are only socially constructed, he says. On the contrary, according to studies referred to in the magazine Science and in the New York Times, in egalitarian societies like the Scandinavian countries, the differences between men and women in personality and in interest tend to magnify. In Scandinavian countries, the vast majority of engineers are men and the vast majority of nurses are women. It may well be that our striving to create equality of opportunity results in inequality of outcome, Peterson says, since men and women tend to prefer different things. Many occupations are sorting themselves out spontaneously by gender, Peterson says, and we should let men and women make their own choices. Aggressive sexuality needs to be integrated in the personality, he says. Aggression should not be suppressed, it should be controlled. Men with a lot of aggression can learn to use their aggression carefully and voluntarily, for example through boxing. In boxing, you have to learn how to take a blow and you have to learn to control your temper. This gives you dignity and respect from others. Then you can be strong and mysterious and potentially dangerous, and all of these things that are so attractive to women. Self-control does not mean identifying as a member of a guilty group because of a class-based accusation. You're not guilty as a member of a class. That is a neo-Marxist idea, which is one of the most dangerous ideas there are. A few men's sexual behavior is used as an accusation against men as such, and you don't make men harmless by making them weak. Enforced weakness is not equivalent to peaceful coexistence. Male feminists cannot distinguish between authority and power, Peterson says. They see everything that is associated with authority as equivalent to tyranny. But in a properly functioning society, authority is based on competence. Compared to every other society that has ever existed on our planet, including those that exist now, our society is definitely not a tyrannical patriarchy, Peterson says. You move up a modern functioning hierarchy through competence. People who accuse men of tyrannical patriarchy, who are trying to move up in the system, are trying to demoralize these men, and it's an assault on competence itself. Feminists, however, including male feminists, don't believe in competence, but only in power. Fools, motivated by hatred and resentment and blind to the complexity of the situation, reject competition because they don't understand its place in a system of cooperation. Competition is embedded in cooperation. The competitors are all except playing by the same rules. They are competing, but fundamentally they are cooperating. Getting rid of gender differences is going to be a lot harder than any social engineers can possibly imagine, and the probability that it will kick back hard is really high, because what most people will do is to defensively revert to a more rigid identity as an attempt to defend themselves against the confusion. Peterson interprets Donald Trump and the far right as a reaction to the feminization of men. The feminist view of men and of masculinity that Peterson describes sounds very much like anti-Semitism and its paranoid stance towards the Jews. I believe that the feminization of society is directly linked to the attacks on free speech and the call for social engineering in the form of Marxism and feminism. The more feminine a society becomes, the more totalitarian. Thus, Peterson's definition of chaos as the feminine archetype and order as the masculine archetype is wrong. As his own studies show, women tend more towards anxiety than men do, and men towards more towards political correctness. Women all over the world tend to vote for left-wing parties, and these parties want a strong state with an extensive state control. Politically, chaos has much more to do with anarchism than with socialism, however, and thus it is hard to see the chaotic in the feminine character type, much rather the longing for order. Women tend to be more orderly than men, according to Peterson himself, and totalitarianism is extreme order. On the other hand, men tend to favor freedom, whereas women tend to favor safety. And men in the extreme left as well as in the extreme right tend to be homosexual. We can only hope that Peterson is right in his belief that the feminization of society will provoke men to fight back and become more masculine again, partly of course because of their own sense of identity and thus of their well-being and sense of meaning, but also because it's the only way that women can find back to their femininity in a positive sense. The far right is on the rise in many Western countries, mainly due to the problems caused by mass immigration, and as research studies show, the differences between men and women are increasing in extremely egalitarian societies like Sweden. There is hope for a renaissance of masculinity in men and femininity in women, and thus for stable and happy relationships and stable, free and thriving societies in the future. The best thing you can do to support this is to work on yourself, which is exactly what Peterson is proposing. But, furthermore, to support a political party in your country that wants to purge schools and universities of all feminist and Marxist pseudoscience.